let's go back to the beginning, to what you said of, what is behind the tool, and this framework of constructivism, because we can all agree, like, hey, being able to appreciate other cultures is just being a good human. Like Monique and I, when we're on the road, she loves to sample foods from other cultures, and we love to meet people from other cultures. And right now we're in Minneapolis, and it's a very culturally diverse area. Yes. And there's a richness to that, and we can have that conversation, and that's cool, but that's not really what's underlying this tool. And we have to think about, what is that framework? It's going beyond just appreciating a culture and appreciating the people or the customs or the values. It's really much more than that. And this issue of constructivism undermines the idea of human universals. And I think that is really where we need to kind of unpack things a little bit more.
Yeah. The founder tells a story in the book where I found the most information. And his story illustrates to me this, and that is, like, we can have a universal value and it can be expressed in different ways by different cultures. And so the one that I use the most with my students, and that I mentioned in the article, is honoring your parents. Like, this is the one that my husband and I talk about on a regular basis. To me, it's part of the 10 Commandments. That's probably a universal value. I see that, I see that as a universal value. But for the Creator's exam, the way we express that universal value. So for example, if one culture's way of honoring their parents might be to bring them into the home, right? So in some cultures, that's what they do, right? They bring the parents into the home and take care of them. In another culture, it could be, I'm going to put them in a care home because these people are professionals, right? And I'll just go visit them on a regular basis. And that can be honoring your parents too. But I think that there is this mistaken assumption from the test creator that no, these are two different values.
I think what you would be arguing then is that there's a universal underlying value of honor for parents, but that it can be expressed different ways.
Yes.
And whereas I think what you're arguing is that in the constructivist framework, it's the very value itself is a construct, that there are no universal moral principles in play. And so if that's true, then what we would say that follows from that is that no one can critique the value system of any other culture.
Yes.
And why that's problematic for Christians is that we are making the claim that there are universal objective moral standards that we have to conform our lives to as Christians that are presented to us in the Word of God, and that these universal moral standards are true in all times and all places for all people. Now, again, the expression of honoring father and mother can be different from culture to culture, but that there is a universal moral principle behind that. And so that's where I think that you're trying to make the case that this is where it becomes problematic for Christians, because we would get downgraded on the test if we say that there are universal moral principles. Or another way of saying that is that there are moral absolutes or rights, moral right or wrong. Is that kind of what you're arguing?
Yeah, you are the theology mom. Very well said. That was great.
Okay.
That's exactly what I'm arguing. And then the other concern is this idea that there's no similarity, like you're not allowed to say there's similarities among humans, which I argue is like questioning the Imago Dei, because we do have something in common. We've got the Imago Dei in common.
Yeah, and I think that's worth kind of teasing out a little bit too, because what the scriptural position is that the image of God, as it's described in Genesis 1 and other places, is a unique feature of humanity.
Yes.
There's no other creatures that are created in the image of God other than humans. The psalmist in Psalm 8 says that God has created the humans a little lower than the angels. And the import of that is that the humans are at the crown of God's creation here on earth. And that because of that, we have intrinsic value, dignity, and worth. The historic Judeo-Christian position has been, because of the Imago Dei, we have a concept of human universals, like something universal to the human experience. There's universal human longings to be cared for, to be loved, to be heard, and that there's universal ideals about being married and the family as being the foundation of society, and the value and dignity of work, and that God has created us male and female. These are all kind of universal human ideas, and where we get the concept of human rights and that sort of a thing. And so I think what you're trying to say is that if I believe those things and I take the inventory with those things in mind, my score would drop.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's actually one, I think it was a dissertation, it might have been a thesis, one author who did interview groups of religious leaders, and realized in her interviewing of those religious leaders that 5 of them, no matter what, would score for minimization, because, as she said, they had an approach of respectful dialogue. Their intercultural competence was respectful dialogue, but they were going to still maintain that people had similarities, that there were universal values. But this test is not going to accept respectful dialogue as intercultural competence. It's not going to do that. And so you will always, I don't know about the whole test, but you will always have items that are scored in the monocultural mindset if you affirm universal values or similarities among humans.